think about your evening routine for a second. Like, really think about it. You walk through the front door, drop your keys in that exact same spot on the counter, and maybe you change into those incredibly worn-out, comfortable sweatpants.
Oh, yeah. The sweatpants are mandatory.
Right. It is totally automatic. You don't even have to think about it, and there is a real comfort in that predictability. But what happens when you decide to just stop doing the one specific thing that anchors that entire evening?
I mean, it throws the whole system completely out of alignment. You take out that one linchpin, and suddenly you are like highly aware of every single minute ticking by in your own living room.
Exactly. And we are taking a deep dive today into exactly that kind of shift. We're looking at some really incredible source material from an author named Susan.
Yeah, and it's worth noting, she has been sober for over 25 years.
Right. And her work maps out the exact psychological and physical timeline of what actually works and, what actually happens in your brain when you decide to change an automatic evening routine.
And her perspective is just highly valuable here because, well, it avoids the purely clinical jargon, right? It focuses on the lived day-to-day experience. So our mission today is to trace this journey for you from the very first night all the way through the compounding changes that happen in the weeks and months that follow.
Yeah, but before we get into the timeline, we do need to make a very crucial clarification about our sources today. The material we are exploring is focused entirely on breaking a habitual nightly drinking routine. We are absolutely not talking about clinical, severe alcohol withdrawal here.
That is an essential distinction. I mean, severe physical withdrawal is a serious medical condition that requires professional intervention.
Exactly.
What we are examining today is really the behavioral loop. We're looking at the psychological reliance on that evening glass of wine or beer to essentially signal to your brain that the workday is officially over.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting right at the very beginning with the first 24 hours. Because if you look at movies or television, we are totally conditioned to expect this highly dramatic, sweating, pacing the floor, climbing the walls kind of experience on day one.
Right, the cinematic version.
Exactly. But the source material paints a surprisingly different, almost like mundane picture.
It really does. The source specifically notes that the first 24 hours without that habitual evening drink usually aren't dramatic at all physically. Like, you aren't necessarily feeling these massive, earth-shattering physiological changes right out of the gate.
Right. Susan points out that for most people, it simply feels like the very first evening you've decided to force your brain off autopilot.
Yeah.
The biggest shift is actually 100% mental.
Yeah.
It is simply the realization that you didn't have the drink, but you somehow got through the evening anyway. It just feels unfamiliar.
Unfamiliar.
And she explicitly says it's not necessarily bad, it's just different.
And that feeling of unfamiliarity is actually incredibly powerful because your brain has been conditioned to expect a specific chemical and behavioral input to transition into, relaxation mode.
Right.
So when it doesn't get that cue, the evening suddenly feels sort of hollowed out or strangely quiet. Your brain is essentially sitting there waiting for a signal that just never arrives.
It makes me think of taking a brand new route home from work because of a sudden road closure.
Mm-hmm.
You aren't physically exhausted by the drive, right? You're just sitting in your car like you always do.
Yeah, exactly.
But when you finally pull into your driveway, your brain feels slightly off and like hyper-aware simply because it couldn't zone out. You had to look at the street signs. You had to actively pay attention to the turns. You were forced completely off autopilot.
What's fascinating here is that this initial mundanity, this simple feeling of being off autopilot, is actually the primary hurdle.
Really? Just the mundanity?
Yeah, the true challenge of day one isn't the physiological crisis. It's the psychological friction of our routine shifting. It's your brain recognizing that a long-established pattern is being interrupted.
Okay, makes sense.
And this quiet disruption sets the stage. It's the moment your brain starts to look around and realize, wait, this might not just be a one-night anomaly. We might be dealing with a completely new pattern.
And it's that realization from the brain that sparks the next phase.
Mm-hmm.
Because that quiet, unfamiliar feeling from day one, it doesn't stay quiet.
Definitely not.
As you move into the first week, it starts to ferment into something a lot more active. The source describes it as this peaking restlessness.
Yes, by the first week, the reality of the change really starts to sink in. The evenings suddenly look totally different to you because there's all this time that used to be occupied by the ritual.
The itself, yeah.
Right, the pouring, the sipping, the sitting in a specific chair. Now the brain is scrambling to fill that vacant space, leading to this very nagging uncertainty. Susan notes you might find yourself constantly wondering, can I actually keep doing this?
I feel like we need a better way to visualize this than just calling it friction. Like, think of your evening routine like a river that's carved a deep, smooth canyon over several years.
Okay, I like that.
The water just flows perfectly through it. When you stop that nightly habit, you are suddenly forcing that water into a brand new, very shallow ditch. Of course, it's going to spill over the edges and feel chaotic at first. The water is restless because it doesn't have a clear, deep path to follow yet.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that restlessness is profoundly misunderstood by most people trying to change a habit.
How so?
Well, people often interpret that chaotic, unsettled feeling as a sign of failure or a sign that they fundamentally need the habit to function.
Oh, like, see, I'm a mess without it.
Exactly. But neurologically, that turbulence is literal adaptation.
Yeah.
It is the raw mechanics of your brain trying to forge new synaptic connections. It's the discomfort of the water carving the new ditch, to use your analogy.
But here's where it gets really interesting. I want to push back on the physical side of this first week, specifically regarding sleep.
Okay, let's hear it.
We all know alcohol is classified as a sedative, right? It depresses the central nervous system. So if you are accustomed to taking a mild sedative every single night to pass out, taking it away should mean you were just staring at the ceiling until 4 a.m. How does the source reconcile that?
It is a brilliant paradox, actually, and it's one of the most misunderstood mechanics of habitual drinking. Yes, alcohol acts as a sedative on the front end. It absolutely helps you lose consciousness faster.
Right.
But what it does to the architecture of your sleep throughout the rest of the night is incredibly destructive.
How so? Because, you're still asleep, technically.
You are unconscious, yes, but you aren't getting restorative sleep. As your liver metabolizes the alcohol in the middle of the night, your brain experiences a severe rebound effect.
A rebound effect.
Yeah. To counter the initial sedative, your brain spikes its alertness chemicals. This is why habitual drinkers often jolt awake at 3 a.m. with a racing heart. Furthermore, alcohol actively suppresses REM sleep, which is the phase responsible for cognitive restoration and emotional processing.
Okay, so you might fall asleep quickly, but the quality of that sleep is essentially garbage. You're chemically blocking your brain's ability to repair itself.
Exactly. So when you stop the nightly drink, you might find it takes a little longer to initially drift off during that first week because you lack the chemical hammer, so to speak.
Right.
But the sleep you do get, it is vastly superior. You are finally allowing your brain to cycle naturally through deep and REM sleep phases without chemical interference.
And Susan highlights this as one of the most vital foundational changes.
Yeah.
Stopping the nightly habit improves sleep architecture so dramatically that it shifts the entire trajectory of your days.
Oh, absolutely.
You wake up with clearer thinking, improved mood, and a stable baseline of energy. You're actually rested rather than just recovering from the after effects of a nightly sedative.
Which is exactly what allows you to progress. That foundation of actual rest gives you the cognitive energy, the mental bandwidth required to manage the restlessness of those evenings. You finally have the energy to endure the water carving that new ditch.
And having that mental bandwidth completely shifts the emotional landscape as you move into weeks 2 and 3.
Yeah, it really does.
You have a few good nights of actual sleep under your belt. The brain is slowly starting to recognize this new rhythm. And this is where the source introduces a deeply surprising emotion into the mix: relief.
Right. By the second or third week, the dominant feeling shifts to relief. The source notes, it's a relief that you've made it this far, but more importantly, a relief that not drinking every night is starting to feel possible.
I have to admit, I struggle a bit with the word relief here. It sounds almost passive.
Passive, how do you mean?
Well, usually when we talk about breaking long-standing habits, the vocabulary is centered around this, Spartan battle of willpower. We expect words like triumphant pride or intense discipline or endless struggle. We want it to sound like a fight. Why is her primary emotion just, relief?
Because the fight you're describing is exhausting, and it's actually what you've been doing while maintaining the habit.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Think about the cognitive load of a daily habit you are trying to manage. It's like carrying around a heavy backpack. You are constantly doing mental gymnastics like, should I have one tonight? Maybe just 2. Is there enough wine left? Or do I need to stop at the store? I shouldn't have had that third one last night.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That internal negotiation takes a massive amount of mental energy.
So the decision fatigue is gone.
Precisely. When you finally take the option off the table entirely, you put the heavy backpack down. You realize you don't have to carry the weight of that constant internal negotiation anymore. The dominant emotion isn't a triumphant roar, it's a deep, stabilizing exhale. The conflict is over.
That makes so much sense. It's the relief of surrendering the debate. And it's that stabilizing exhale, that newfound mental space, that opens the door for the most profound psychological shift in this entire timeline.
It really is the turning point.
Because once the daily conflict is gone, you can finally look at the bigger picture. Susan notes that right around the 1-month mark, this relief evolves into something much more powerful, which is self-trust.
This raises an important question about how we construct our own sense of identity. You see, a repetitive habit isn't just an action you perform. Over time, it writes the narrative of who you believe you are. If you rely on a drink every night to cope with work stress or social anxiety, you implicitly teach yourself that you cannot handle those things without a drink. You begin to view yourself as fundamentally fragile without that specific external crutch.
The habit starts defining your boundaries. It tells you what you are and aren't capable of.
Exactly. The action dictates the identity. But when you break that automatic loop and you stack up 30 consecutive evenings of proof that you don't need it, you prove that limitation false.
Yeah, you gather evidence against it.
The source emphasizes that you stop seeing yourself as someone who needs an external substance to navigate their own evening. Earning that back creates a quiet, steady self-trust. And that doesn't just change your evening routine, it fundamentally alters how you view your own capacity for change in every other area of your life.
I really appreciate how Susan grounds that self-trust in tangible realities too.
Yeah.
She talks about noticing these incredibly specific freedoms that you couldn't access when you were on autopilot.
Like what?
For instance, the simple ability to take a spontaneous evening drive. You can just grab your keys at 9:30 p.m. to go get ice cream or run an errand because you aren't legally or physically tied to your couch after having a drink.
That's a great example.
Or the freedom of waking up with completely clear mornings every single day. There's no negotiation, no mental haze to burn off, just a clean slate.
And those specific freedoms act as positive feedback loops for the brain. Every spontaneous late-night drive, every crystal clear morning, acts as a deposit into your new account of self-trust. Your brain logs those moments as evidence that the new identity is beneficial.
So what does this all mean for the long haul? Because, a month of self-trust is great, but life is incredibly long. I think the ultimate fear for anyone attempting to break a core routine is, are you just doomed to white-knuckle your evenings forever?
Right, that's the big fear.
Is it always going to require an active, exhausting exercise of willpower to ignore the empty space where that habit used to be?
The resounding answer from the source material and from behavioral neuroscience is no. You are not doomed to white-knuckle it. Over time, the automatic pull actively, physically weakens.
And crucially, this doesn't happen through gritted teeth. Susan's own experience is the perfect testament to this. 25 years later, she says, I don't think about drinking alcohol at all. But how does the brain actually get to that point of total indifference?
It comes down to the mechanism of neuroplasticity, specifically a process called synaptic pruning.
Synaptic pruning, okay.
Yeah, your brain is highly efficient. It only sends resources to the neural pathways that get used regularly. When you stop traveling that old deep river canyon we talked about earlier, the brain realizes it no longer needs to maintain that infrastructure. It actively prunes away the synaptic connections tied to that urge.
So it's not just that you get better at ignoring the urge actually degrades structurally.
Precisely. Because the pathway is starved of use, the urge becomes less predictable, then less frequent, and eventually the brain just paves over it. It ceases to be something you have to manage because the neurological cue is gone. It simply no longer fits into the physical reality of your brain's current architecture.
It just fades entirely into the background. And, if you're listening to this and dreading that initial restlessness or wondering how to actually survive that first week while your brain is screaming for its old pathway, Susan's materials actually map out how to build these new pathways.
Yeah, she offers a lot of practical support.
Instead of just a list of ideas, she provides resources for those ready to make the leap. Things like her article, Why Do I Drink Every Night?, which unpacks the root triggers, or her practical guide on what to do instead of drinking at night. She even offers a structured step-by-step course called 66 Days to Break the Nightly Drinking Habit that gives you actionable replacements for that evening anchor.
Having a structured path is invaluable, especially when you are trying to force that water into a new ditch during week 1. But if we distill all of this source material down to its absolute core message, it is a massive paradigm shift in how we view breaking a habit.
Paradigm shift.
Yes, because we naturally assume that stopping a behavior is an act of deprivation. We think about what we are losing. But the reality mapped out here is that stopping doesn't take something away from your evenings. It actively gives something back.
It gives back physical clarity. It gives back literal hours of your time. It gives you back the steering wheel.
Exactly. It transitions your evenings from being automatic and chemically managed to being intentional and fully yours. And once you begin to actually experience that abundance, once you realize how much cognitive space you've reclaimed, it becomes infinitely easier to maintain the new path.
It's a complete reframing of the entire experience.
Yeah.
Let's recap the journey we've just mapped out for you. We started on day 1, which turns out not to be the cinematic physical crisis we see in movies, but rather the quiet, slightly jarring unfamiliarity of simply sitting in an evening that has been taken off autopilot.
Which leads right into the turbulence of week 1, where that unfamiliarity ferments into a restless rewiring of the brain. And we explored the massive paradox there that taking away a nightly sedative is actually what unlocks restorative, unfragmented sleep.
And that superior sleep provides the required mental bandwidth to reach weeks 2 and 3, where you finally put down the heavy backpack of internal negotiation. The friction yields to a deep, stabilizing relief.
Which sets the perfect stage for the 1-month mark. This is the critical turning point where you stop just surviving the evenings and a profound return of self-trust takes root. You physically and mentally prove to yourself that your old limitations were false.
And over the long term, that sustained proof triggers synaptic pruning, causing the old habit to physically degrade and lose its grip, fading from a daily struggle into total indifference.
It is incredibly powerful stuff.
It is, and it applies so broadly. Whether you are currently looking at a nightly drinking habit, or perhaps you're recognizing another automatic evening routine that has quietly taken over your time, mindless scrolling, binge watching, whatever your particular anchor is, the mechanics of change happening beneath the surface are the exact same. Small progress, just getting through that one unfamiliar evening, builds the quiet confidence needed to tackle the next day.
It really highlights the hidden compounding power of our daily rituals, which leaves us with a fascinating and maybe slightly uncomfortable thought to ponder as we wrap up.
Oh, I'm ready.
If simply breaking one repetitive evening routine can fundamentally rewrite your own self-trust and shift your entire identity in just 30 days, what other harmless daily routines might be quietly dictating the person you believe yourself to be right now?
Wow, a truly great question to leave hanging in the air. Think about that the next time you drop your keys on the counter and settle into your evening. That wraps up our deep dive for today. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next one.